Om Tat Sat. My humble prostrations to the all-pervading Brahman or God, to my worshipful Guruji, Swami Jyotirmayananji Maharaj, to sage Narada and all the sages and saints, and to each of you divine soul watching today's satsang. So we are studying the Narada Bhakti Sutras, and today we will be covering chapter 1, sutra number 5. Commentaries from my worshipful Guruji, Swami Jyotirmayananda ji, and narrated by myself, Swami Nikhilananda. So let's get started. Sutra 5, chapter 1. Yat prapya na kinchit vanchati na shochati na dveshti na ramate notsahi bhavati. One more time. Yat prapya na kinchit vanchati na shochati na dveshti na ramate notsahi bhavati. Meaning, having attained that divine love through self-effort, he desires nothing else. He grieves not, hates not, and finding no delight in the sense pleasures, he is not excited about the sense objects. So a very deep sutra. So let us go deeper and introspect. Yat prapya means having attained. So in Sutra 4, the use of the words yallabdhva meant having attained that. This was suggestive of the revelatory nature of supreme love, devotion, like the moon, shining moon. So when the clouds are obstructing the moon is not visible, and when the clouds move away, the moon is visible. So much in the same way, bhakti is like that. It is not created as the fruits of our actions, nor is it acquired like objects of the world. If that were so, devotion would also be perishable and illusory as the objects of the world. But we know that's not the case. Devotion comes from our emotions, and as we go deeper with our bhavna, and the moon is perpetual, we can see it, our emotions create that. Nevertheless, this should not give one the idea of negating self-effort on the path of devotion. So devotion, if it's there, then we say, well, what's the point of the effort? The point of the effort is that through that you are able to see the moon, through that knowledge, through your effort. Therefore, by using the words yat prapya, the present sutra emphasizes the need of self-effort, that you acquire it, because otherwise, so in other words, it's an acquired skill. Purification internal is required. The moon is ever the same, but the clouds are the ones obstructing it. So we have to remove those clouds of doubt and anger and fear and hatred and so on. So the present sutra emphasizes the need of self-effort to prepare the right condition of the mind, wherein supreme love manifests spontaneously. So it has to be a spontaneous process. One who sincerely strives to cultivate devotion receives Bhagavad Kripa, divine grace. So that is the divine law. That is why I always guide, our Guruji always guides us to say, be humble, be compassionate, be kind, be sincere, because this is for ourselves. We are not fooling anybody. So our thought, word and deed have to be totally aligned. And then once that's the case, we start receiving Bhagavad Kripa. God starts to bless us, which in turn enables the devotee to direct his self-effort to its successful consummation of supreme devotion or Jivan Mukti. So even the aspiration for us to do our self-effort, for me to do this satsanga and for you to listen to this satsanga, is also an act of divine grace, God's blessings on you to inspire you to do that. Otherwise you would not be pulled on this side, you see. So many punyas, many good merits germinate, cultivate for us to get on this holy path. So that is the act of divine grace also, that is blushing and blooming for us. So we have have to be always thankful. Don't give credit to your ego for your self-effort. Give credit to divine grace for it. Na kinchit vanchati, he desires nothing else. The innermost urge in every human being is the attainment of supreme love through self-realization. We all want to be totally whole. We want to be complete. We want to be loving. That's why the term Sat Chit Ananda, truth, existence, bliss, absolute. The self is the quest of one's love, one's life, and the object of one's supreme love. Self or Atma, consciousness. But due to ignorance, the mind seeks the fulfillment of love through objects of the world. So this is where the problem comes in. Due to our lack of depth of understanding and ignorance, we start thinking that the objects are the ones giving us pleasure. But that's an illusion. That is wrong thinking, because the real pleasure is coming from within you. This gives rise to the expression of numerous desires. But because we are intoxicated with wrong knowledge, we keep on finding pleasure in the transient things, which temporarily gives us some relief, and then we are constricted again. In the Gita, Lord Krishna explains the formation of desires and their ultimate result. So Lord Krishna is saying these two shlokas of chapter 2, Bhagavad Gita 62-63. So chapter 2, shloka 62 and 63 are very important. So I will chant these shlokas for those of you who read Bhagavad Gita also, so you can see what Lord Krishna's thoughts are about it. He says, ध्यायतो विषयान् पुंसः सङ्गस्तेषूपजायते सङ्गात् सञ्जायते कामः कामात् क्रोधोऽभिजायते क्रोधात् भवति सम्मोहः सम्मोहात् स्मृतिविभ्रमः स्मृतिभ्रंशात् बुद्धिनाशो बुद्धिनाशात् प्रणश्यति. So what does that mean? That means by constantly dwelling upon objects, sense objects, one develops attachment to them. And from attachment there arises desire. From desire is born anger. And from anger there is delusion. And from delusion, loss of memory results. From loss of memory, one loses the function of reasoning, pure reasoning. And from the loss of reason, one heads towards destruction. So very deep chain of events occurs in these sense objects, these objects of the world that constantly drag us into sense pleasures. And these two shlokas by themselves are a full ocean full. You have to go deep and deep to fully understand the implications. But the real reason is because once our intellect is deluded, then there is no hope for us. We continue to tumble in the cycle of birth and death. Therefore, attachments and control over them is very, very important. An aspirant gains the insight that desires are like fire. They cannot be quenched by sense enjoyment once you're on the path of bhakti that Narada Muni is trying to guide us on. So then he has understood what Lord Krishna is guiding us also at the same time. So which only act like offerings of clarified butter. As we said, the more butter we put in fire, the more the fire blazes. We automatically know that. So feeding it and making it flare, rather by developing vairagya, which is dispassion, arising out of an increasing love of God, which means your love of God should grow to an extent where the love of the world starts to diminish automatically. You cannot fake it. You cannot just be artificial about it. It has to be genuine, and it becomes genuine when you are doing genuine bhakti, when you yourself are genuine. So when we are trying to be a sincere aspirant, then he is able to restrain his cravings for sense objects. For this is why sage Patanjali also has all these yamas and niyamas, rules and observances, ahimsa, treat everybody like yourself, non-violence, those kind of things. They all take a lot of practice for us, and then slowly this becomes our lifestyle, and we are basically being able to restrain ourselves from these sense pleasures, sense objects. Therefore, even the subtlest desires still present in his unconscious are finally resolved by the glorious vision of the divine self. So, as long as we are sincere on the path, the divine energy continues to guide us and gives us strength and blessings. Desires also arise from a sense of incompleteness within oneself. Think about this deeply. Why do we want things? Why? Because we think we will be happier with them. We will think, oh well, now I have something. But that happiness, as with your own personal experience you can see, is temporary. It's short termed, and then something else happens. We run somewhere else. So there is no perpetual happiness. So we are trying to look for that completeness within ourselves. The unfortunate issue is we are trying to find it in the sense objects, worldly objects, outside relationships, things. But where it resides is really inside of you. It's coming from you. So for a devotee, however, there is an increasing awareness of fullness arising out of divine communion. So when you start doing that, you automatically become Atma Kama, Atma Tripta. You are totally contented. How can he be drawn to the objects of the world when immersed in spiritual bliss? So when you start enjoying that expansion of consciousness, bliss, everything else dies away. Just think of your sleep experience when you're having a wonderful nap, a beautiful sleep, a comfortable sleep, and all the joyous objects of the world have no power for you. You have no interest in them. The sleep that you are experiencing is holy nectar. So think of this, that devotion is much more profounder than that sleep experience even. So how can we run after these transient pleasures of the so-called world process? That is the deeper insight, but that is the end result we will get to. Right now we have to put in our effort, though. We have to forcibly extract ourselves out of these stressful sense pleasure giving situations and do our penance, our tapasya, our sadhana. While negation of all desires is an aspirant's goal, he should not consider the desire for liberation also a desire. Yes, it is a desire. You say, I want to get liberated. That's a desire, but it's an auspicious desire. It's a shubhecha. Shubh means auspicious. So out of this birth and death experience, we want to go towards nectar and moksha, mukti, self-realization. So that is called a spiritual aspiration. Those desires are to be encouraged. Satsanga is a desire, but that's a holy desire. So encourage that, grow it, and therefore you are converted into that desire of longing for God realization. So when that gets there in your heart and you feel restless without your spiritual practice, then those are all admirable desires. But desires to go to parties, to drink, to go and have fun, and pleasures of the world that eventually extract our peace, are desires we should avoid. So I hope that makes that point clear. Desires that give you sattva purity to grow, are what you should do, and desires that drag you into rajas and tamas should be avoided, that drag you into inertia or that drag you into worldly activities. And just as fire dies automatically when its fuel is exhausted, this longing is consummated in the attainment of supreme love. So automatically love flourishes. Na shochati, he grieves not. Until the self is realized, one must continue to experience the miseries of the world process. Such is the cycle. And grief refers to pain in all different forms, experienced by every soul in the state of bondage. What is bondage? This whole perpetual cycle of life and death. And to cut it is self-realization, mukti, liberation. Even pleasant experiences arising out of virtual deeds are in fact painful experiences. This is explained if you go back to our Patanjali Raja Yoga Sutras we covered for serious students, bonus points if you want, and you pull up Sadhana Pad Sutra number 15, Raja Yoga Sutras chapter 2, Sutra number 15, you will get more insight that I have already covered, since I cannot cover that here. But the point is that even pleasant circumstances are really painful. The human mind is ever involved in manifold worries. The teachings of Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita open with this shloka, second chapter and 11th shloka. Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, Ashocyananvashota sochatsvam pragyavadanscha bhashase gatasuna gatasunshcha nanu shochanti panditaha. He tells Arjuna, oh Arjuna, you're grieving over something not worth grieving for. So things that are not appearing before you, people who have departed and who are alive, wise people do not grieve for them. So you are grieving for things not worth grieving for. Therefore, getting away from sense objects also makes logical sense from that perspective. The elaborate teachings of the Lord then culminate in the end statement. 18 chapters is Bhagavad Gita. In the end, he says, Sarva dharmana parityajya mamekam sharanam raja aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshishyami ma shucha. Shucha means grief. He says, don't grieve. In the end, he says, abandon everything, leave everything and just hold me, come to me, become my devotee. When he says become my devotee, not just Krishna, but God, that Brahman, that all-pervading consciousness. And then he says, once you are there, you will attain me. So do not grieve, therefore. That is the essence of all of Bhagavad Gita. It took Arjuna 18 chapters to digest this knowledge of not grieving. And yet most of us in this life are always grieving about something. If one were to develop objectivity towards his worries and anxieties, he would find that he is wasting immense mental energy over things that are not as negative as imagined. Even in your own practical experience, see, our mind makes mountains out of molehills, and we have to teach it to restrict itself, restrict those movements, apply that energy in your spiritual work. He would also discover that his grief merely hindered his possibility for advancement. So nothing, we have wasted time. Grief does not solve anything. So therefore, rather do something creative. Nothing is accomplished by grieving. Mashucha. Yet people continue to grieve out of ignorance. You cannot change what has happened. So therefore, why grieve? Do something rather constructive. When a devotee brings about the utter negation of his limited self through the realization of the divine self, he has no reason to grieve. He crosses the ocean of sorrow. Yatra ka moha kaha shokaha ekatvam anupashyataha. So this is what is covered in the Ishavasya Upanishad. Shloka number Sutra 7, it says, he who sees unity, how can there be grief or delusion for him? There is no grief. He crosses the ocean. And finally, na dveshti, he hates not. Nadveshti, in this sutra that Sage Narada is guiding us, he is touching on all the important things that we struggle with in human life. Dveshti means because we have either sense object attractions, or we have hatred towards people we don't like or things we don't like. And desire gives rise to hatred. When a desire is frustrated, the mind riding on the currents of raga, which is principle of activity, descends into the depths of tamas. Now the same raga becomes inertia, and joyous expectation is turned into hideous hatred when something doesn't happen according to our expectations. This is in the worldly realm. Raga and dvesha, which are attachments and hatreds, are like the twin afflictions arising out of ego. These are like the poison fangs of a snake, and that's where the poison resides. As long as the mind is ruled by them, it is difficult to experience the bliss of true devotion. So while raga and dvesha are there, it is very hard for us to enjoy real bhakti or devotion. But when a devotee begins to enjoy the nectarine bliss of devotion, it becomes impossible for his mind to entertain the sentiment of hatred towards anyone or anything, because he starts seeing God in everything. He starts focusing his energy on the divinity rather than on the negative things. The divine self is the reality and substratum behind everything, even disgusting objects. A devotee does not perceive the divine presence merely in objects that are beautiful and pleasant, but even in dirt and filth, he is able to behold his supreme beloved, the self. Just like a mother even loves her ugly child because she is connected to the child through her heart. Same way, a devotee starts seeing God in everything, even in the good as well as the ugly things in this world, because everything is God's creation from that perspective. Na ramate, he does not delight in pleasures. So due to ignorance, the bliss of the self is projected on the objects. Atmanaste kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati. We like things because of the attractiveness, but we are trying to satisfy the self, but we are confused. We think it's coming from the objects, but it's not. So it's coming from the self. Happiness, however, does not reside in the objects, as we have discussed several times. The power of Maya deludes the ignorant, but not the vision of a devotee. Maya is illusion, and most people are sucked into that illusion. Rather, a devotee sees the world filled with the glory of God. He does not depend upon external objects for his happiness. He is Atmakama, self-contented, and putting in his effort all along, but experiences increasing joy emanating from the supreme love that abides in his heart. And when that happens, tears of joy come easily. He feels connected to that divine energy, and the divine energy loves him back because he's making an effort. We take one step towards God, God takes 100 steps towards us. No tasahi bhavati, he does not become excited by sense objects. So he's not utsahi, means enthusiastic. In the case of one who is not enlightened, one who has not torn the evil of ignorance by the force of supreme love, there is constant dependence on the external conditions of the world. That's why we are afraid of being by ourselves, or we want to be with objects or things and so on. He performs actions in order to improve his circumstances and expects a favorable development as a result of his actions in the world. Thus he continues to create new karmas, and as long as the karmas continue, the cycle of birth and death continues. So therefore it becomes a vicious cycle. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more karma we do, the more actions we create, and so on. But all this while we are taking time away from God, not putting time into our spiritual sadhana and so on. Not to mention, we should not do our duty. Our duty is worship. We have to do our duty. Here what we are talking about is all the idle sense pleasures, running here and there, thinking that we'll find joy. But joy doesn't reside in those things. That's the important point. In the case of a devotee, however, the very sense of doership is effaced. The divine will performs actions through him. So the divine, you become a divine channel. That's why sages and saints are like walking gods on earth. There is no difference between Guru and Brahma, Guru and God. That's why we say Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah. For that reason I call my Guru as worshipful Swamiji, worshipful Shimananda Ji, holy, all these things, because they have lived that life and that we are trying to emulate, see. And then once the divine will comes, we all become divine channels. Then divine energy says, oh, he's my pure devotee, so therefore he will be my representative. Just like you send ambassadors to different countries, and whatever the ambassador says is as if coming from that country wherever the ambassador is assigned. Like our American embassies in the world all around, whatever the ambassador of that country will tell them is, to them it's as if America has told them, right? So that's pretty much how sages and saints are. We are walking, talking representatives of God. That's why satsanga, they are instruments through which you connect to the divine channel, so to speak. So, as a result, they are not attached to the fruits of action, and they do not depend upon external conditions or expect any external developments. They are constantly happy, and serious aspirants also, as they walk on that path, it is the Guru Shishya Parampara. Shishya means the disciple. The disciple becomes the guru, and then the guru and therefore he gets the disciple and the lineage continues. And that is the beauty of the system of Shakti is energy, and we are connecting to that link all the way to Adi Shankaracharya ji. And if you those of you who have not watched my Bhaj Govindam sections, I strongly recommend you do that to develop Vairagya. Vairagya is dispassion, and it will greatly help you. There are already playlists and so on created accordingly in my channel. And those who have not subscribed by now, please consider sharing or subscribing or sharing this phenomenal knowledge that all our sages and saints of Sanatana Dharma have shared this wisdom. Whoever touches it, feels it, can actually get transformed. His life can get transformed. So therefore it's an act of satsanga, an act of great grace towards humanity by bringing this knowledge to as many people as you possibly can. So therefore sages and saints, whether there's a prosperous condition or adverse condition, they are neither elated nor depressed. So they are constant. It's called Samatvam Yoga Uchyate. Bhagavad Gita also guides us about the same knowledge. All these scriptures have the same message. They say Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. There is only one truth expressed in different ways and forms. So it is for us to digest whatever way works best for us. I know this was a long satsang, but again in this since bhakti and emotions are important, I am giving more emphasis to the content and the material rather than trying to keep it under 10 minutes and so on. Those nuggets are okay, but now I'm addressing this Narada Bhakti Sutras and so on are more heart-based, so therefore we need the ability to focus and meditate and go deeper and develop devotion. So for me, I think it's more value added to you, and you can leave me comments as well as to what do you think of these longer sections, and please leave me comments if you have questions as well. This is Swami Nikhilananda. We'll be covering more in the next sutras, but as you can see, the profundity and the depth of these sutras are like an ocean. So we have a lot of ground to cover, but let's do it with love, do it one day at a time, and let's not try to rush too much. Just enjoy the journey while you are immersed in your practice. Om Tat Sat.